African oil project is already taking a dire environmental toll on Uganda's largest national parks, a leading conservationist group said Friday. Despite opposition from environmentalists and rights activists, the French energy giant is pushing ahead with its Tilenga drilling project in Uganda and a 1,443-kilometer crude oil pipeline to transport its output to the Tanzanian coast. The $10 billion project involves drilling more than 400 oil wells in 400 oil wells in Western Uganda, many of them in Murchison Fall Nature Park, a biodiversity reserve, and the country's largest national park. According to environmentalists, they said the project is already severely impacting wildlife and the fragile ecosystem in the park just a year after drilling began and before production gets underway next year. Maintaining that over 120,000 people have been displaced by the project in Uganda and Tanzania, Nabiruma said she was hoping for justice, and in that case, and lamented that many have been unable to replace all or parts of their land. In a statement to AFP, Total Energies insisted that its projects in East Africa certainly does not involve moving hundreds of thousands of people. It insisted that many with land along the pipeline will be able to use it after the works, adding that 775 households will be rehoused in the vicinity and in better conditions, end quote. Meanwhile, AFIEG reports, which relied on satellite image analysis and interviews with locals, tour guides, civil society actors, and biodiversity experts, documented serious environmental issues. It found that vibrations from the drilling wells were chasing elephants into surrounding communities where they were destroying croplands and increasing running into humans. At least 5 persons have been killed in such encounters last year. The report also said lights mounted on the rig, which could be seen across nearly 14 kilometers, was negatively affecting natural and light-sensitive wildlife like leopards and lions. This is indeed shocking.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because we do not have any environmental impact assessment of the Total operations in Mozambique. I would like to know that as well, because obviously there you have massive major construction too on the land, and then a lot of it on the sea as well. So I never thought about that. So we should look into that as well. But in the Uganda one, the article lays that clearly. And obviously, you mentioned the publication which has published this. This is definitely not The Economist or the Financial Times, because this is actually looking at it from the other side, those who point out the damage that unchecked capitalism can do. So that's why you would not find an article like this in the Financial Times or in The Economist with very specific data about the consequences of what Total has been doing in Uganda. And I like the public relations, because, most of people, and then, listeners, if you didn't know, a lot of the people in public relations for the major corporations are people who were once good journalists, you see. So they know how to spin words and to spin the story and to turn it upside down or downside up, right? So you're being told that 120,000 people have been displaced in Uganda and Tanzania, according to Madame Nabiruma, who works for the environmental impact organization.
Yeah.
And Total does not deny it, but they actually deny it without denying it. So they say Total's work certainly does not involve moving hundreds of thousands of people.
But
they're not denying that our work has actually displaced them by forcing them to move on their own. Oh, it's just amazing. That's why I say it has to be read in capital letters, bold with exclamations. But it takes practice. After a while, you can start reading through their lies and deceptions, mostly deceptions, because they really don't lie. It's not really a lie. He's being honest. We are not moving 100,000 people. That's a fact, right? But you're forcing them to flee, right? With elephants chasing after them. You see? But this project is under a lot of pressure. I think a few weeks ago we discussed an activist who had been arrested and tortured. Who was opposing this project. Been arrested. I think he protested outside the parliament buildings in Uganda.
And they said
so severely that he had to spend time in hospital.
And they said
so
he concocted the story of him
exactly.
being
He sort of manufactured these wounds upon himself. But the protests have been global. There have been global protests, not only in Uganda alone, in France itself, in other European countries. Yeah. And as a result of that, many of the companies who initially had committed to ensure the project have backed out. Many of the Western banks who were after profit, looking to get their share of a piece of the cake, right, as King Leopold said, they too have backed out. These banks have backed out, the major banks. And that is why General Museveni has now had to run to China. And there was a spin article last year in October where the Ugandan, I think it was the government newspaper, said China very receptive to project. And then when the government newspaper spun it that way, a few Western outlets also then picked up the story, and they were misled by the government newspaper into saying that China had actually agreed to finance, because they still need, I think, $3 billion that China had agreed to finance, to offer that financial gap. And then they quoted the Ugandan minister saying, we think that by April 2024, we would have struck a deal. And obviously they're thinking if they publicize it like that, since China did not reject it outright, that would, force China's hand
back to the table, yeah.
But China is not in the business of throwing $3 billion around, particularly when China is also observing the politics on the ground in Uganda. The guy's been there 38 years. China observed the 2021 elections and could see obviously that this guy did not win, stole the election from Bobby Wine, and that the election of 2026 is probably going to be even much more intense if he survives until then. And then as we speak right now, there's an ongoing protest in Uganda against corruption, against parliament, that is echoing the ones that have been going on in Kenya. It's being organized by Generation Z on social media. So you can't go and arrest any of the leaders. So in fact, when the protest started yesterday, they just grabbed anybody who was showing up at the protest, Since there are no leaders you can go after, right? So I think they arrested 20 plus something and brought them to court. So you're arresting the people that are protesting against corrupt officials, but you are not arresting
the corrupt officials.
And you know, in China, corruption is a big deal.
Yep.
In China, public officials who are convicted of corruption are executed. You know, they're shot on the back of the head, right? That's how they're executed in China. So you think China is eager to attach itself with this kind of regime right now? Maybe at one point in the past, but right now, I don't see China giving that money as a result of the protest, and then as a result of having well-prepared people like Nabiruma. And if you read the details that she's providing, it's very detailed. I don't see how any major financier or bank would want to be involved in this project.